Welcome to Mental Architectures. Today's topic, why saving money in this day and age can be a mistake. We were told that saving is always a good idea, like a never questioned dogma. I could always feel like there was something wrong with this vapid, overused piece of almost religious advice. But I couldn't verbalize why I felt it was a bit off. I always knew there was an opportunity cost to everything we did in life, but what's a better alternative to saving money? After all, isn't that what our parents, our teachers, and the classic motivational speakers like Napoleon Hill told us? Well, if you don't know yet, strap in for a mind blower. There's something wrong with this world economy today. If you think that it's normal to work so hard and long all day, no pun intended, just to get by, and you don't wonder why prices go up and wages go down steadily with virtually no hope for your children's future, then skip this podcast. It's not for you. If, however, you want to know more, allow me to begin with a story. My grandfather was born in the 1930s in Cyprus, a small British colony with no natural resources and no potential for productivity. He went to Great Britain to work, I think at the age of 12. He worked and worked and worked. He worked as a waiter, and at some point he saved enough money to buy his own restaurant, which he ran. He got married, had children, and he saved up money, sold his restaurant, and bought a whole apartment building with a restaurant, a pub, and several apartments. He and my grandmother did all that with their own two hands together. No overhyped university education, no innovative ideas, no money schemes, no gambling, no help. Just hard, honest work. My grandparents left the dead economy of their native country, went where there was a free market prosperity, and worked their asses off. When their children got married, they bought them each a house and left them some money too. They worked hard and they saved. This was the business model of success of the time. When there's a flourishing economy without war, disease, oppressive regimes, and other hurdles, there was simply no excuse for not making wealth back then. There was a direct positive relationship between hard work and wealth. In the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even 80s in the States, one man could have a full-time office job, and it was enough for his wife to stay home and take care of the kids. With that paycheck, the whole family could own a house in a nice neighborhood, they could have a car, and they could even have a TV, the luxury item of the era. With that paycheck, they could even save and send their kids to university. This doesn't happen anymore. The purchasing power of an average salary these days is enough for survival and a paycheck to paycheck living. Both parents need to work full-time jobs just to get by. Kids need to make astronomical loans to go to astronomically overpriced universities. Families live in tiny old flats. Commuting is an expensive and unnecessary nightmare. You work just to pay for the expenses you need to make to give you the ability to work. And things are getting worse and worse decade by decade. Even if you had enough residual income after paying for the demands of today's society, your savings in the bank are not a sure thing anymore and they yield no interest for you. Not only that, but inflation runs much faster than any savings interest out there, so your savings lose their value by the second. This is the reality. You cannot make it by working or saving today. You'll just be a slave waiting for a pension that is in fact a very unstable and collapsing Ponzi scheme. And with declining populations around the world, you're probably never going to see the pensions you were promised. I'll make an effort to describe some very simple economic principles, and then I'll tell you what I think you can do instead of saving money. Let me give you some eye-opening insight in economics, stuff they deliberately didn't teach you in school because it makes governments look bad. Saving money was the model for accumulating wealth back in the day, but now something has changed. It's not a good idea to save money anymore. But why? Well, it's simple. It's because the central bank world conglomerate or cartel or whatever the hell you want to call it keeps printing money or magically creating it in digital form like typing in numbers in a bank account. This is counterfeiting money, and anyone who tells you otherwise, like your government, for example, is flat out lying to you. Counterfeiting money means increasing money supply. And even though this may spark some short-term unsustainable fake growth, otherwise known as an economic bubble, an increase in money supply basically means that the same economic output of the world is now represented by more units of currency. Therefore, prices will rise since buyers will have more perceived spending power. But that spending power will not be followed by a corresponding increase in supply because production capacity remains the same. By the way, a parenthesis here, this is what inflation is. Inflation is not the greedy capitalist business owners grabbing for more money. On the contrary, sellers have every reason to charge less than their competition for obvious reasons. And competition always exists unless corrupt government officials are lobbied enough to regulate favorably for some over others. This is called a monopoly. But the only reason for inflation is government and central bank intervention. In this case, bank manipulation of the supply of money through quantitative easing and the cost of money through interest rate manipulation. Okay, I digress because I think more people should be educated in the science of economics before committing to a political ideology. Anyhow, back to why saving being a bad idea today. When a central bank via government and through commercial banks via loans push more counterfeit money into the economy, money that no one ever worked to create, by the way, this means that each dollar that you have saved up has less and less purchasing power. Each dollar you have saved up has less value with each counterfeit new dollar. And they print billions and trillions at a time, and they deceptively call it quantitative easing to sound benevolent, when in fact it's a direct theft from your savings, whether you like it or not. Central banks and the governments under them don't have to rob you anymore, they just print more money. So if you keep money in your bank account or under your mattress, the money loses its value with every second. This loss in value is represented by higher and higher prices in everything because it takes more units of your money to buy the same thing. The cost of living is steadily going up. It's going up faster than your increase in income. This is precisely what inflation is. Inflation is a steady increase in prices. The only reason for inflation is money printing by the central banks and facilitated by governments and commercial banks. And they're not even hiding this scam. They're just twisting it and presenting it in a way that sounds comforting to the ear. So, saving money long term is not the best idea today. In my grandfather's time, if you worked hard and honestly, there was almost no possible way that you couldn't make wealth. But today, it doesn't matter how hard you work. You can work all day in an office banging your head on the wall, and you'll never make the same kind of wealth you could 50, 60 years ago with the same effort. But what can you do to escape this trap of inflation? And by the way, this inescapable prison of inflation and of crippling hidden taxation, which is another subject, by the way, is akin to slavery because you work and most of your pay is taken by inflation and hidden taxes that are mostly spent on embezzling, war, and bribes. What can you do? Well, the only thing you can do to maximize the worth of your labor is to move money fast. The velocity of money exchange is the only thing that makes your money somewhat keep its value and maybe even compound it. So you save in the short term and you invest. And let's say the easiest way to invest, if you don't have an innovative idea or if you don't have a specialty for an entrepreneurial endeavor, you can engage in real estate. For me, real estate has three uses. One is use. When you use property, you get the value of living in it. This makes your real estate a liability because it costs you money, but at least the cost is justified by you using it. The other is using real estate as an asset, renting it out or using it for a business that makes you more money out of your investment. A bar, a factory, a restaurant, whatever. And finally, the third use of real estate is flipping it, meaning buying it cheap and selling it for more. Even if you don't develop it before you sell it, you can buy a piece of real estate during a depression when the prices are low, and when prices go sky high in the next bubble, just before the next inevitable depression, you sell high. You think that you made a profit, but you really didn't. You just saved your money and you just adjusted for inflation. You probably didn't make any profit, but at least your money, because it was put in the real estate at the right time, didn't lose its value. So these are the three uses of real estate and are, for me, the easiest, most down-to-earth way of escaping this trap of modern slavery, which is basically working and paying most of what you make in inflation and taxes. And the funny thing is that you don't even realize it. This is why I think saving money in the long term is not a good idea. Saving in the short term to amass some equity so that you can invest is a good idea, but saving long term for decades so that you can retire or pass to your children is currently the worst way of accumulating wealth, just like social insurance or social security. Rich people never save money in the bank. They have some money in the bank for liquidity for their businesses, but they never save long term. They stress all the time about what their next investment will be in real estate, business, or whatever. Doesn't matter what, as long as it's a good deal and as long as it moves their money fast to escape the effects of inflation. So that's the discussion for today. I hope you enjoyed it and that it stimulated you intellectually. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.